Okay, morning everyone. So we're going to get started with the presentation. And let's see here. So my name is Hal Lowen, and with me in this presentation is Janet Rothney, but you're not seeing or hearing from Janet unless she might pipe in a little bit later or throughout the presentation. She's monitoring the questions area. So before we do that, when I get to that, I just wanted to acknowledge that the University of Manitoba campuses are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji, Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that they were made on these territories, and we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with the Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So I'm going to get back to this questions part of it. For some of you, this GoToWebinar might be a new platform for you. This session is being recorded, but your pictures and your ability to ask questions online or live are not enabled, but you can ask questions in the control panel, which you should see probably on the right-hand side of your screen. And we'd ask that you post the questions there. I'm going to keep going with the presentation, but Janet is going to answer any questions that you may have. We also have a couple of other people that are shadowing this presentation, a couple of our library assistants at Neil John McLean Health Science Library, so they might be able to help with some technical questions as well. That would be Nicole and Stefania. So thank you to all of those that are helping me with this presentation. So all the slides, I just wanted to let you know that scoping review, and except for the scoping review and advanced searching sections, are derived from the JBI, the Johanna Briggs Institute Manual for Evidence Synthesis. It's a great resource, and we have access to that resource, and you will have a link in that in the PowerPoint slide deck that I've made available to you. And that's in the handout section, which is in that control panel. So I'm hoping that the attendees can see that. In there, you should be able to download that. If not, send us an email and I can send you the slide deck directly to your email address. So I'm going to try a little poll here. Are you considering or have already started a scoping review? So let's see if I can launch this poll. And launch it. Here we go. For attendees only, so I'm going to give you just a quick minute. I just want to find out where if some of you have actually started a poll. There we go. 70%, 80%, we're almost there. No worries if you don't want to answer this question. So I'm going to close that poll. And it says, nobody has started one, but you're thinking of it or not sure. So hopefully this is able to answer your questions or some of the questions you have about scoping reviews. Okay, so the goals and objectives of this session. So to understand the basic structure and purpose of a scoping review, searching techniques, and some tools and resources that help in the scoping review process. So the objectives, hopefully by the end of this session, you'll be able to articulate what a scoping review is. And this is an important part of not only scoping reviews, but also systematic reviews, but to understand fully what a scoping review protocol is and why it's important to have that as part of your process for doing a scoping review. And then to understand some of the scoping review advanced search techniques. You might be doing some of that searching yourself, in which case, we're as librarians here to help you with that. Depending on your status, you can qualify for having some searching done by librarians. You would have to be a faculty member to do that, and then there would still need to be some discussion, but it's always good to understand some of those search techniques so that when you are discussing with a librarian, you know what's going on, or as if you're doing the search yourself, you have an understanding of what's required. So webinar content, well, I'm going to do an introduction to scoping reviews, elements of a scoping review, exactly what it is. It's going to be a little bit dry, but it's part of the process. You get a good look at it. Scoping review protocol, we'll go over some of that. We'll take a look at some. Advanced searching, like I said, and finally some of the scoping review resources and tools, and that's available on a slide. Great. So introduction to scoping reviews. So one of the things that it's good to know is that scoping reviews are newer than systematic reviews. They've been around for a while, but not as long as systematic reviews. And the first real framework for scoping reviews was developed in 2005, and we'll get into that framework a little bit later. But it's to develop, we're just gonna remove some of this, develop to answer questions that cannot be answered by systematic reviews. So that's the purpose of the scoping reviews. Okay, great. So a description of what is a scoping review. Seeks to systematically search for and appraise and synthesize research evidence, often adhering to guidelines on the conduct of a review. So that's a description from the JBI manual. There is a really good resource in an article by Grant and Booth, and that is in the resources section. So you should be able to find that in that slide deck that we sent you. So it's, yeah, that's what a scoping review is. It's similar to a mapping review. You may have heard of that term. So it can be similar to some other reviews, but the term scoping review is now pretty established. Okay, so what is a scoping review and what does it really do? Well, it's a bit of a reconnaissance. So it's used often to clarify working definitions or conceptual boundaries of a topic or a field. It's useful when a body of literature has not been comprehensively reviewed, so that's why people will undertake a scoping review. Let me just take a look at my slides here. And it can often be as a precursor to a systematic review as well. And this is from the JBI manual, so that's what they would describe it as. It can be used to identify the types of available evidence in a given field, right? So that's one of the reasons why you would want to do a scoping review. And it's to identify and analyze knowledge gaps. It's also used to clarify key concepts and definitions in the literature, and to examine how research is conducted on a particular topic or field, and to identify the key characteristics or factors related to a concept. It can also be used as a precursor to a systematic review. You can often find out enough about a field that a systematic review can be warranted. Okay, so elements of a scoping review. So this is a little bit of the dry part, but let's go through this. Elements of a scoping review, I just wanted to talk about a little bit about how it compares to other reviews. I'm going to go back to that. So systematic reviews are traditionally quantitative, but not exclusively. So the scoping reviews are systematic reviews are quantitative, but not exclusively. Systematic reviews answer specific questions or series of questions, and these are some of the differences this is not what scoping reviews. Rapid reviews are systematic with shortcuts. They're done very quickly. And umbrella reviews are very similar, but they're from multiple reviews in one accessible, usable document. So those are the different types of reviews that are out there that are a little bit different than a scoping review. So here's a table that might be a little bit tiny, but like I said, you have the slide deck. And it does give some comparisons to traditional literature reviews and scoping reviews and systematic reviews. So it's comparing the three of them and what are some of the elements in that. So what is the framework? The framework is the stages of the review process. So here's another table that looks at the stages of a scoping review. This is not a comparison. And the way to read this table is just to go down each column and not across it. So in 2005, when Ashley and O'Malley developed this framework, they had identified the 6 key frameworks of doing a scoping review: identifying the question, identifying relevant studies, study selection, charting the data, collating, summarizing, and reporting results, and then consultation afterwards if that was needed. As you can see, people have expanded on that, and Peters et al., which there's been 3 articles that they have written on that. They've expanded it to 9 different frames in that. So it's worth taking a look at that and seeing, if you're considering doing a scoping review, what are all the elements that you will need to consider. One of those elements, and we'll get into this in a little bit more detail later on in this presentation, is the protocol. And the protocol should be the very first thing that you do. And it's often called a priori protocol. And it contains predefined objectives, methods, and reporting. If you will, when we look at some of the places where you can register protocols, you can see, especially if you're going to the JBI standard of protocols, how exhaustive they actually are. They don't all need to be that way, but it's a good model to follow, the JBI model, because it really gets you to think about your topic in depth. And what you will have in there, to the extent of it, you'll even have things like inclusion and exclusion criteria will be identified, how data will be presented. But the most important part of the protocol is that it allows for transparency and limits the reporting bias that can occur. So a lot with the protocol will, the important part of it is that it shouldn't change the actual scoping review you do from your protocol. And if it does, in good scoping reviews, they will indicate that when they started their scoping review, they had to change from the protocol that they originally presented. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the detailed sections of what a scoping review is. And yeah, so title, basic stuff needs to be clear, concise, contains, and it should contain the phrase scoping review. That makes them very easy to identify. The abstract, pretty exhaustive actually. Abstracts will state an overarching review of the project, the components, the inclusion criteria. There, in the abstract, there will be an introduction, brief description of what is being undertaken in the review. It'll include the inclusion criteria. It'll include a description of the methods and some of the results as well, and the conclusion. So it's like a mini article in of itself. So the introduction needs to be comprehensive. It has all the main sections, reason for the review, rationale, detailed definitions, knowledge of other relevant reviews, scoping or otherwise. The JBI manual, which I keep referring to, but like I said, it's the gold standard, suggests that the introduction could be up to 1,000 words in length. So you can sort of get a sense of how overarching this particular part of the document is. You will then have the review question. You will talk about the inclusion criteria, and this needs to be very clearly defined. And there needs to be a congruence between the title, introduction, and the inclusion criteria. So it should all line up. The concept is detailed, things that you might want to include in the concept, types of participants. I'm reading the wrong slide here. Sorry, the types of participants, it needs to be detailed. You need to do things like include age and other qualifying criteria. Great concept. This is what I was confused by my two slides here. The concept is the principal focus. It must be clear, and it has to be related to a research design, framework series, and classifications that you are looking at in your scoping review. Context, again, everything clearly defined. Consider geographical and locational factors. Those are the things that you would want to describe in the context. Race and sex can also be considered, and specific settings. So these are things that need to be described in the context section for your inclusion criteria. Types of evidence. What types of evidence are you looking for? These are important things to identify. Can include existing literature, primary research studies. These are the types of articles that you're willing to look at. Other systematic reviews, meta-analysis, letters, guidelines, blogs, websites. But it's up to you to decide exactly what you are going to include in your scoping review. So to get to this point, you need to have some prior knowledge of what the literature is all about. So it's important to do your homework. Methods, the methods that are going to be used to conduct this review, and this is where it gets back to the priori protocol. It needs to match that. So you should, it shouldn't deviate from that. I've been involved in a bunch of scoping and systematic reviews, and certainly things do change as you start to go through the literature. You may have decided on a particular method or methodology, but then as you're starting to go through the articles, this has changed. It doesn't mean that you can't change it, but you would just have to acknowledge that when you set out to do the scoping review, this is what you had intended to do, but then things had changed as you had gone through that. But that's part of the process of discovery. The search strategy, how the search was done. The search strategy has to be comprehensive, and it has to have a detailed description of all the sections of the search. You need to describe the subject headings and keywords used, the languages that were being considered or not considered. One thing that's important to understand about the search process is that it's iterative and that things change, but this should all be documented when as the search goes. The search must be transparent, and by that you include a copy of the search in the appendix. So that's all very typical of a scoping review and as a systematic review as well. The screening and selection section, how the selection was done, detailed for all sections of the selection. So there's the initial title and abstract screening part of it, and then there is the full text part of the selection. So that's going to be very detailed as well, and what articles, the number of articles that were excluded, the number of articles included, the flow chart. So And again, this is following the protocol. You should have both a narrative section and a flowchart as well. And there are tools that can help you with this, and we'll cover that this at the end, but there are things like Covidence and Rayan, and even spreadsheets that you can do your own as well. Teams agree on the definitions of the selection process. One of the things that I often are starting to get teams to do is that I will take a sample of the search results and have the team go through that and do the screening and then take a look at the results. And I would suggest that a team is ready to go through the entire process of screening the results of a scoping review when they've reached 70% agreement upon articles. So that's what that little test period is really good for, is that did we agree upon the number of articles to include? And if that's at around 70% or exclude, then we know that the team should be ready to go forward with the screening process. And again, this information is added to the appendix of the scope and review. So data extraction, how extraction was done. And there's charting tables, and that's the big thing you will see in a lot of scoping reviews is there are a lot of tables, and they're interdispersed throughout the article itself and through the appendix. So, sorry, got a double slide here. Great. So what is included in a data extraction table? It's pretty straightforward stuff. Authors, year of publications, country of origin for the articles, aims, purpose, populations, methodology, intervention types, if that's what you're looking at. Sorry, there's number 0.8 drifted out of number 7. That should just be 1. Outcomes, how details of these, and key findings. So here's a little example of what, not a complete, but it's just to show you how a table is set up for that sort of data extraction and the things that you're looking at. So there's an analysis. The important thing in the analysis is it's not a synthesis of results and outcomes. Typically in scoping reviews. For many scoping reviews, simple frequency counts of concepts, population characteristics, or other fields of data will all that needs to be required. However, other scoping review authors may choose to perform more in-depth analysis, such as descriptive, qualitative content analysis a little bit later, or as part of their scoping reviews, but it doesn't have to be that sort of in-depth analysis. It depends on what you're looking for in your scoping review, and including basic coding of data. Tables, charts, and figures, like I said, are a big part of it. Best if you are planned at the time of protocol development. So you already sort of know what you're looking for when you are starting your scoping review, and that's some of your background work and research that needs to be done. It reflects the identity, characteristics, and summary of the evidence, and it also may identify some of the research gaps that the scoping review reveals. The possibilities in this area of what you can do has exploded in terms of tables, and data visualization has changed a lot of this for us. We have much more extensive abilities to present the data in more meaningful ways than just tables, because sometimes there's just the information is too dense for just a straightforward table, and data visualizations will be better for that sort of data presentation. And we have a resource area in the library and a librarian who specializes in data visualization. who can help with the presentation of this data. So yeah, the resources are out there. So again, we've taken a look at this standard table, but other types of data information can be present. So it can be things like this type of data visualization, including flow charts. To me, this is a little bit too dense, but this is certainly something that I pulled out of a particular scoping review. And so you can sort of take see how you will be creating those tables and charts, and to things such as this. So some data visualization is good, some is not so good. So it's good to spend some time taking a look at that. Finally, you will have the results and search results, and this will be part of the scoping elements of the scoping review, sources of evidence, review findings. So here is, sorry, this one's a little bit out of sync, but this is the flow chart part of it. That could go into that other table section. But again, more visualization of how articles were identified, and the whole process with getting to the number of studies that you had selected for your final inclusion in the scoping review. Finally, there's going to be the discussion and the conclusion for your scoping review. And an important part of it, and one that I see in a lot of scoping reviews, but certainly not every one of them, is the conflict statement, acknowledgements, and the references. But it's particularly that conflict statement. It's not always easy to find that in some scoping reviews. So we won't do exactly this article, but again, this is in that slide deck that I have sent you, and it should be a live link. Hopefully, let's see if this goes to, I'm just gonna have to log in here. I'm gonna drag that over, so hopefully you can see this. That link will, if you're a U of M person, student, faculty member, you'll be able to get to this, but this is a typical scoping review. And it gives all of the things that I've talked about, or maybe all of them. If you're interested, you can go to that exercise and you can then open up this checklist. And there's that article again. And just a little exercise if you wanted to go through there and just sort of see, does that particular scoping review that I've identified contain all of these elements? Great. So that'll be in that slide there. Okay, so the protocol. Like I said, it's detailed, and it requires quite a bit of background work. You will know before you're going into your scoping review a lot of the information that you anticipate you should be finding. But to do a little bit more in-depth research is certainly going to help you develop that protocol. And one of the important things to do with that protocol is to register it. So there are some places that you can do that. Let's take a look at a couple of this. I'm just going to pull up another one. And so that first link takes you to the JBI, and it provides a downloaded protocol. Let me expand this so you can see what's going on here. But yeah, you would just take this protocol and fill in these blanks, replace those words, and it gives you all of the things that you should consider having information on and how to build your protocol as you go. Yeah, very helpful document for that. Close that up and get back to this. We also have an article here in the Annals of Internal Medicine, and it's a checklist, and it's a great place to get sort of that information of what you need to do, consider while you are constructing your protocol. So another great resource for that. And then I've got a couple of places here. Got to find my mouse. There we go. The Open Science Framework. This is a place to register your protocols, and you would just sign in. You would create an account in here, and this is a portal in which you can let everyone know, one, I'm interested in doing scoping review, and the other way you can use this is to see, well, is there anybody else out there who's already doing a scoping review on my topic? And you can search for that. It requires a little bit of hunting and pecking through it in order to find it, but certainly a place that you will, one, check to see if there's a scoping review being done, and if not, a place to register your own scoping review. And similar to that is something called Figshare, same idea as the Open Science Framework. Again, this particular slide is in that slide deck for you, so you should be able to follow those through. So I'm going to talk a little bit about searching for scoping reviews and the search part of it. After all, I'm a librarian. This is the part of it where I'm more comfortable with the whole process. You should know some research basics when it comes to doing a search. And perhaps the biggest one that we are proponents of is that using a search map, really plotting out your search, identifying your main concepts, all of the keywords, subject headings, all the terms that we're going to use in the search, and to actually use either a spreadsheet to create your search map, or even just a pen and paper, just someplace where you're actually working out the entire search. You're going to want to use a search log as well to actually record the numbers that you are, the raw numbers that you are getting as the result of your searches. This is a really important, and it's especially important when you start filling out that flow chart of the articles that came in as the result of your searches. If you have additional questions about that, we can make an appointment with myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll certainly be happy to help you out develop not only your search map, but also your search log and the things that you need to consider as you're doing that search. One of the important things when it comes to searching is to also to create accounts in the different databases. Let me see if I can pull something up here. If I can find one, I'll give a demonstration of what that looks like. Oh, this is not going to work so well. I have to change my username apparently, or my password on a database. I was trying to get on this yesterday, and I was unsuccessful because for some reason the autofill, I've relied too much on my autofill for my usernames and passwords and databases, and something has gone awry in my one database here, and I haven't gotten into changing it. But here's a database that I would certainly start building a search for scoping review in the health sciences. And one of the things that it has the ability to, or I have the ability to do is to create an account in this. And why do I want to create an account in this search? Well, the account will, let me see if it, oh, yeah, no, I did change this, so it's good to go. What it allows me to do is it allows me to save searches, and in here I can rerun searches. I have a record of the search. Yeah, so no, I find it really helpful. I wonder if I can, I've got enough time here. There's one in particular that I'm looking for. Let's see, I saw one here, balance, scope, and review. Don't know what this one looks like. Yeah, so this is regarding postural balance. This little scope and review, we're looking at very specific titles. But the nice thing about this is that I can go in here in this database and rerun the search without having to always recreate it. And yeah, it's certainly a good way to keep a record of your search, but also to rerun the search, because typically we don't always get the search right on the very first time, or it takes a lot of time to develop. And so having the ability to save a search and go back to it is really helpful when it comes to doing these types of reviews. Great. Other things that you need to consider are database selection, really important. The search strategy, you just saw a little bit about that, but in particular, when it comes to doing scoping reviews, it's been recommended that you do a three-step approach to doing that. And this search strategy would be initially start with a limited search. So you would, and what I mean by limited search is not searching all the databases at once. Search at least, definitely one, but preferably two databases, such as Ovid Medline, which I showed you, and depending on the topic, it could be another database such as CINAHL or PsycInfo. So you'll run that, and that'll be your test search just to make sure that everything is running properly. After that, you will do, once the changes have been made to the search and you're happy with it, you'll do an extensive search of all databases and sources, so that can include things that are not databases, such as websites and other great literature resources. And once you have completed all of that, and you've actually done your title and abstract screening, and you've done your article selection, you'll want to do one more search before you're finished, and that is looking at reference lists of articles that you think you're going to include in your scoping review. And those reference lists might give you different articles that weren't captured necessarily by your literature search. So getting back to the search strategy after you've done the three steps approach, other things to consider are languages. What are the languages that you may want to limit a search to? And finally, you might want to consult a librarian regarding the search. That's we can help you with that whole process. We can provide you with advice on search strategies, databases, all those sorts of things. If you qualify, and you would need to have a discussion with a librarian on that, and we can't do the stretch or search for you, there are things that we might be able to help with. We may be able to review your search for you. This is certainly something that we do with each other, and it's called a press. So if you're going through the literature and you see something referring to the press, this is where if I'm doing a search, I will construct that and I will give that to my colleagues, such as Janet, who is monitoring the questions. And I see there's been some questions going through. And she'll review my search strategy just to make sure that I haven't missed anything or there's a problem with the syntax of the search or the way that I'm putting things together. So it's an important part of that whole search strategy for us as librarians. It's also good to remember that searching is iterative. So that means that, like I said earlier, is that we don't always get it right the first time, or we discover things as we go along, and that we need to change it. So the search strategy keeps evolving until such a point as we're happy with it and it's capturing what we want it to capture. So I'm going to take some time here in the presentation to talk a little bit about scoping review tools and resources. Here are a couple of tools that we use. Some are a little bit high end and some are really good for even the novice. But this article that I referred to, that Grant and Booth article, let me see if I can pull it up quickly. It's a good article to take a look at because it gives a pretty nice definition of not only scoping reviews, but other types of reviews that are out there. And there's a table in here. Sorry, the display is a little bit odd or a little bit chopped up, but it does a good description of what the different types of reviews are. So take a look at that. Maybe you're not actually doing a scoping review, and this table and this chart will help you determine that. You may think you want to do a scoping review, but it may not actually be the appropriate type of review for you to do. Here's a tool that we use as librarians. It helps us discover what are subject headings that are should be considered in a scoping review as we're constructing our search map. It's a little bit more of an advanced tool. And this tool works when you already have articles. And what I'm going to want to do is type in the identifying number on a particular article and put that in here. And it'll do a search of that, and it'll give me a table of subject headings. So if the articles that I'm using with this particular tool are things that I'm pretty sure I'm going to be including in my scoping review, and this is all getting back to your background research, I'll put those identifying numbers in here, and it'll give me an indication of what are the different subject headings that I need to include as I'm developing my search map. So as you can see, there's a lot of background work that goes into a scoping review. There is a press template, and this comes from the Cadets people. And in here, it's a big long article, but there's an attachment to that, and that is actually a lot like a protocol, and it helps you identify your search and your exact search strategy. It really makes you think about that. And this is the template that I will fill out and I will send to my colleague in order to have my colleague review my search process. Not going to talk too much about the Bramer method for deduplication. That's very advanced, but if you're an EndNote user, you need to, or if you're not even an EndNote user, I'm going to get into, I should talk about deduplication, and I haven't really. Deduplication is an important part of the whole search process. When we search multiple databases and we get the results, we do not do our selection of articles at that point. We will just take the batch results from our search, and we will collect all of those and we'll put them into our bibliographical management tool. If it's going to be something like EndNote, or it can be things such as Zotero or Mendeley, and will deduplicate the results of those searches using those tools. The reason I included this Bramer method for deduplication is a scoping review is usually pretty extensive. It is, and what I mean by extensive is that the number of articles that you get when doing a scoping review and you have to review will be, can be in the hundreds if it's a very specific or narrow scoping review, but it can be in the tens of thousands. I have sent results to people that have over 20,000 articles. Question was very broad and they were willing to go through that. But when you have those sorts of numbers, it is really important to do a deduplication, so you're not looking at the same article over and over and over again, because that's what happens when you search multiple databases and you compile all those results. Other tools that are available here, I'm having trouble finding them. There's my mouse, is Rayan. It is a screening tool. It's a freely available tool. And yeah, it allows me to put the results of my reviews in here and do a blinded screening with the other people that are involved in my team. University of Manitoba also has is in the process of getting covenants. It is also a screening tool, and you can ask your librarian about that, and we can get you using that tool as well. It's a lot like Rayan. It's a tool that you use for that screening process, but it goes a little bit further than Rayan, and it allows you to do some data extraction, and it'll help you create your Prisma flowchart as well. So those are some of the tools that and resources that you might find you need when doing a scoping review. So finally, I'm just going to review our goals and objectives. Hopefully you have a good understanding now of the basic structure and purpose of a scoping review and some of the tools and resources that are used, searching techniques and tools and resources. You should be able to articulate somewhat what a scoping review is. Probably not just based on this presentation, but you know that you need to work through the protocol of a scoping review and to demonstrate the ability to use advanced searching techniques. Finally, if you need to contact me, it's pretty simple, straightforward. It is my name, hal.lowen@umanitoba.ca. Just refer to scoping review grad steps or workshop and shoot a question at me. If it's pretty straightforward, I'll answer you directly through the email. If it's somewhat more extensive, we'll probably set up an appointment where we can discuss in depth what your information need might be. Finally, I just want to show some of the resources where I was able to get some of the information for this presentation. So that is it for my presentation. I think we've been getting some questions in there. I'm pretty sure Janet has, I'm just opening up the questions. Oh yeah, a few questions in there, excellent.
Yeah, hi Hal, we have had a couple questions along the way. I've answered them all, but we might want to go over a few of those things again. So I sent a definition of what JBI is, and you might want to talk about that in comparison to Cochrane.
Yeah, so the Johannes Briggs Institute is an organization that looks at the synthesis of information, and It's also an organization, but it also has a database that's involved with doing searches for that, and it's a database that we still have available at the University of Manitoba. If you go to, it's simply to get to the manual itself that talks about systematic reviews and scoping reviews. Joanna Briggs Institute, there's a link in the handout that takes you to that, that takes you exactly to the manual. So that is available, but you can just type in Joanna Briggs, and that's with 2 N's, JOANNA Institute. Looking for that will take you directly to their website where you can get to that manual. But if you're actually looking at the database, you need to go through our University of Manitoba databases and look for the Johannes Briggs Institute database. And it's in that Ovid platform, and you can actually do some searching in there. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I'll just add that it started as a sort of a nursing scope, but has since broadened to many health professions, whereas Cochrane has kind of come out of medicine and more clinical specific types of a focus. The other question that I answered that might be useful for everybody is to talk a little bit about what subject headings are, when you were talking about the mesh analyzer and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so articles, when they're added into the databases, are depending on the database, but most of the databases out there, the big databases, think of your Medlines, your PsycInfos, subject-specific databases. They have subject headings that are assigned to the each article that is added to that database. And those subject headings are like tags or identifiers that are consistent tags or identifiers for a particular concept. So to be able to understand what the subject heading is that describes the concept you're looking for helps you find more of the articles that are related to that concept. It won't find you all of them. You got to do a little bit of keyword searching with that subject heading, but when we do that search process, it is important for us to identify the subject headings. Janet, are you seeing my screen still, the Ovid?
Yep.
Excellent. So in here, let me expand this. This is that search that I ran from that from my search our account, and it was on the subject of postural balance. So this first search here, postural balance, this is the subject heading that I put in the search. And to capture that whole idea of balance and postural balance, I've also included some keywords. So this is what the search looks like, and anything you see here with a slash is the subject heading itself. In these articles down here, these initial ones may not have subject headings added to them. Yeah, no, they're pretty new articles, so they don't always have the subject headings available to them. But sorry, I don't want this to be distracting, but I'm just going to find the articles in here that have subject headings. So I'm doing a little filter in this. So in here, all of these articles now that I look at them have a list of the mesh headings. Maybe that's what you're familiar with if you're in the health sciences. And these are the subject headings that have been added to describe this article. And I picked a really bad one because this one's got way too many subject headings. But yeah, so these are the tags that were added to this article to describe exactly what this article is about. So in order for me to find all of the relevant articles, I'm going to search for these subject headings. And it looks like it's picked it up based on my population filter, but it also has some other terms in here which would have come as a result of those things I was looking for on postural balance. So definitely not an article that I would want to keep for the that scoping review, but that's what happens in that process. So I hope that explains subject headings a little bit, what they are. It's always a tricky thing that we struggle with as librarians, trying to explain subject headings.
Yeah, it's a bit of a complicated concept, but there is, in most of our databases, there is some kind of index. So if you're not a health sciences person, there's usually something that kind of lists the subject heading or is called a thesaurus. So take a look in your favorite database and see what's there. Not all databases have it. So if you use like Scopus or something, they don't have an index. So you just have to rely on keywords, and then you need more synonyms, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the bulk of the questions. I don't know that the folks can see the slides, so maybe you can send them by email. I did pop the article links into the chat just as we were going through that example and stuff.
Yeah, it's funny, I can see the slides here in my handouts, but if you're not, then no worries, we'll get you those slides. We have a list of all the participants, so we'll send those out. If you don't get anything
Some
within,
of them do have.
Pardon me?
Some of them were able to get them, so.
Oh, okay, good. If you weren't able to find them or get them, send me an email directly. And that's probably going to be the quickest way for you to get the slides. All right. Okay, good. Good. If there are no further questions, then I'm going to end this webinar. Thank you all for attending. You should receive an email with a small little survey on the presentation. We'd appreciate if you take the time to fill that out. Information is always handy. Like I said, if you have any questions about scoping reviews or other types of reviews, feel free to contact myself or my colleague Janet or any one of us librarians at the University of Manitoba. We'd be happy to help you with that information. All right, so I'm going to stop the show now. Thanks everyone, have a good afternoon.